Hello, everybody, and welcome to Handmade Hero, the show where we code a complete game live on stream. We are doing some sort of, I guess I don't know what you want to call it. We're doing some improvements to our code. We've done a bunch of work to kind of define some good stuff with the debug system, and now I'm in the process of trying to consolidate it down into some things that are like really kind of easy to use, clear, concise. The code is nice and not too complicated or stringy, and we just started doing that, and I want to continue doing that today. If you are following along at home, today's 2:11. You want to take day 2:10 source code and start with that. That is the source code that I am starting with here, and let's just dive right into it, because like I said, we're kind of just doing code architecture work here, and so there isn't anything in particular to discuss. We just kind of have to start looking at the code and figuring out the sorts of things that we want to do with it, right? So where we left last time is we were sort of cleaning up the code to do all the debug stuff that we were doing. We did some neat things. Now you can actually dump debug bitmaps, but we still have some more stuff to do there in terms of getting all of the debug stuff working as kind of a unified system. So I wanted to do something to start out with. The debug stuff is kind of, it's fairly verbose in here. There's a fair bit of it. You can kind of see how much there is. I kind of want to take this stuff and maybe start breaking it up just a little bit more. As far as the debug system is concerned, I don't feel like any of this stuff in here is really all that, it's stuff that really gets exposed to the rest of the program in any particular way, right? If you take a look at where we're doing handmade debug.h, trying to remember exactly where we put that in here. Let's see, where is my handmade debug.h? All right. Yeah, so handmade debug.h only even appears inside handmade debug.cpp, right? And so what I want to do is since this system is completely isolated, what I want to do is be able to have a header where I pull out all this stuff for the debug system and kind of keep that in its sort of own place that I can look at it a little more carefully, right? That's something that I would like to do as we're doing this process. Or that is, if I could manage to take a drink of water without spilling it all over myself, which is sort of a separate programming challenge that, apparently I failed. So what I'd like to do is, I feel like handmade debug.h, since that's already taken, I guess I don't really care what the name of it necessarily is, but maybe I'll just say handmade debug macros or handmade debug interface or something like this, like that. And then I can sort of take this stuff and I can put it in there, right? So all of this stuff that was in there, that's all that sort of debug annotation things that are happening, I'm just going to throw them in there. And then in here, I'm just going to include it. And again, this doesn't do anything at all. It's a completely useless thing that I'm doing. There's nothing to it. It doesn't change the code in any way. All I'm doing is breaking these things off into a single file for my own logical benefit, right? It's just so I can see stuff and know that I'm not like looking through all of this going like, okay, there's a bunch of platform stuff in here. Oh, there's the debug stuff, right? So this is the, that's literally all it is just so I can kind of have a little better scope and understanding of what's happening there, right? So again, that changes it not at all. So let's come back here. And I believe at the end of the stream yesterday, what we had done is sort of try to set ourselves up so that debug variable no longer actually is a thing anymore, right? And so if debug variable was no longer a thing anymore, really if you take a look at what's going on here, the primary thing that's going on here is this char star name, right? The char star name, that char star name is something that will have to be sort of looked up differently. But other than that, there really isn't anything that we still need the debug variable for. So I'm going to try just pulling the debug variable out entirely. And what I'm going to do here is anywhere that we were previously doing something with the debug variable, I am instead going to use the debug event, right? So I'm just going to, again, this is just me attempting this. I don't know what's going to go on exactly in here, but we're just going to give it a shot, and we'll see what happens. I want to find everywhere we do struct debug variable. I can't remember how this goes exactly. Maybe something like this. Is that right? Let me see. No, maybe the dot operator. No. Thought there was some way to get it to actually search for that, but I don't know. I guess there isn't. I thought we looked this up before, to be honest with you, but maybe not. Anyway, I want to get rid of these forward declarations of it. One of the wonders of C and C++ is the fact that you have to forward declare things, which is always kind of nuts and silly. But anyway, yeah, so if we take a look here, we just kind of have this concept that now debug variable links just have events that they're backing. And I feel like since a debug variable link at this point points to an event, we can sort of start to simplify things down a little bit, right? Okay, so debug interactions are now would just be talking about debug events, I guess, right? And that's all that would be happening there. And then in here, whenever we're talking about a debug variable and we're trying to convert it to text, we're really talking about converting a debug event to text, right? Like so. And like I said, we're going to have ways of getting at those names. Now, there is one thing we could do, right? Which is we could try to make, we could leave the debug variable thing and always like decache the name every time. But I'm just going to see if we can get away without doing that, right? That's what I'm going to try to do, and I don't actually know if I'll be able to do it, but I'm going to try to do that. So if we look and we see a debug event somewhere, we should be able to find, let's see here, we should be able to find how we were getting at those records to begin with, right? So let's see here. It's actually called source, I think. So this right here, you can kind of see how this works. If we want to get sort of the source from something, all we have to do is kind of look up that event translation unit and then the debug record index that gives us what we're looking for. And then that particular thing will give us back like the block name that we're looking for, right? Because that's a debug record, and the debug record has the string in it. So if we wanted to do something like get event name, right? Or something like that. Or we could even just call this get name, because we're passing a debug event, so we know what we're talking about here. All we need to do is say, okay, the result of that is just whatever the event's block name is, right? And that's it. So that seems reasonable enough. And so now, anytime we want to know the name of something, we can just say get name and with the debug event, and then we get it. So everywhere in here that I was previously doing var name, I should just be able to put the name in, and everyone's happy and fine and dancing around like jubilant children, but not bratty children. Actually, you know, children who are nice, you know, and reasonable people. Oops, that was supposed to be source. Okay. So yeah, really that's all there is to it. There's not a lot more that I'm going to do here. Again, really we can just now basically remove a bunch of the dereferencing. Like you can see that we're starting to flatten out. There was just a lot of that sort of dereferencing going on. And now again, we're just kind of collapsing that down into a nice, you know, more straightforward way. Again, this is just that sort of smooth kind of polishing operation where you're trying to get things into, you know, a better circumstance. And hopefully we set ourselves up, you know, hopefully we're not polishing the turd at this point. Hopefully we're polishing something that will polish down into a nice little beautiful gem, a little beautiful, you know, I don't even know why I'm saying these things. This is not teaching anyone programming. So yes, don't pay attention to what I'm saying, just pay attention to what I'm doing. I'm just trying to make it so that, again, we're sort of removing unnecessary indirection, we're removing unnecessary cruft from things. And again, that's normally not that difficult to do, but in a lot of places that can be relatively complex. Like in this system, it's very complicated, it has a lot of moving parts to it. And so that's why I'm kind of taking in like that iterative approach of like sort of smoothing it over time. So anyway, you can see again, I'm just continuing to flatten these things out. In a lot of cases, it's as simple as just, in fact, I probably could just do this, take var and replace it with event, would probably be, would probably be fine as a thing to do. So here we go. There's that event. You know what? Var arrow is probably just going to do that transformation just about everywhere. In this case, these are all, that was our radial menu. That's what that was. We should re-enable that sometime soon. It'd be nice to have a menu again. All right. Okay, so we got var. That's actually going to be event that we're passing now. And debug variable to text not found. Did I change it to debug event to text or something? Debug event to text. I did. Well, shows you what I know. I guess I was more proactive about that than I thought I was going to be. All right. So again, same stuff here. This is just changing var to event. And it looks like we don't really need to change a lot of these things. So there we go. Yeah. All right. This again is going to be a direct reference. So that should be fine. Nothing else particularly weird going on there. This is debug event. This is also debug event. There we go. And same thing here. Again, just flattening that in direction out. So now we're just working directly on those events. And everything is fine. So in here, we are creating these events. I think that should actually probably be fine. The var type equals type. Debug type to U8. That's all fine. Again, var name is not a member of debug event. That is true. So in this case, this is a little bit wonky, right? When we're creating variables here, we don't really have the ability to store an additional name in them in that way, right? But what I can do is I can extend the concept of the debug variable very trivially. I'm sorry, the debug event, right? So when we got here, debug event, I can extend the concept of debug event quite easily to support this, because since these are variables of any kind and there's a union in it, if I want something you know, like that would have a name associated with it, I can do that by just creating a variable that's a name type, right? I can also create arbitrary additional debug records in some kind of special translation unit level or something like that, where I push additional ones on, and I can do other things like that if I want to. So I'm not sure exactly how I want to approach that, but again, you can kind of see that this is the place where the collapsing is going to be difficult for us, because if we remove the concept that this has a name pointer in it, things get a little bit harder. Now, there is something we could do here if we wanted to that would make this a little bit again, more flexible, and I don't know if we want to or not, but we could actually also say that debug events, you know, eventually we could sort of move away from the concept that there was a debug record index at all, right? We could say that the debug event just stores the pointers directly in it, and the cost is essentially more, again, more throughput traffic, right? It makes these things a little bit bigger. Excuse me. But we certainly could do that. So right now, we have things like the location in the source code, but maybe we don't care that much about what the location of the source code is, or something like this. And you can imagine us storing, right, in addition to the clock, you could imagine us storing a name directly in here and moving away from the debug record index entirely. Because the debug record index at some level has caused us nothing but pain. It's just kind of a pain of a, you know, it's kind of an annoying thing to have dealt with, right? So we could actually decide to kind of go that route and stop having the concept of the debug record index if we don't really care about that aspect of it very much anymore, right? If that's not something we really care about, that's certainly something that we could figure out ways around, right? And so at the cost of increasing the structure size a little bit, which at this point we don't really have to worry about at all because it's piggy, but assuming that we were actually in the future going to try to compress this down a little bit by only storing what we actually need to store here, which is basically would be just a very simple thing that would happen in the actual push call. We could sort of start to work around that particular part of it, right? I'm not sure what I want to do about that yet. I really don't know. So what I might do for the moment is I might say let's just finish this phase by sort of getting rid of that notion at the moment, right? And instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, when I push one of these debug event things on here, right, maybe I'll zero struct that guy. So I know it's cleared out. And I'm not going to deal with the name thing yet. That's just not going to be something that I actually deal with. Oh, I actually want to do that. Okay. So we'll take a look at that in a second because I may want to do that, and we'll see what we want to do there. Okay, so we have debug variable link. I've got a thing where I'm talking about the debug variable, and I don't have one of those, so I'm just going to, again, continue to move those over to be events. So everywhere we're doing that, that all just will work, actually, even though it's still called var. There we go. Debug event. Same thing here. Debug event. And yeah, yeah, it's all good. So again, this is really just me changing this name, but that's mostly it. Not much that has to happen there. Okay. That's, again, just the fact that that var would have to be this event. And that's just about it. Okay, so now we're going to have some things that don't have, oops, that's no good. Where are we in here? Oh, well, yeah, so that's actually probably quite reasonable thing to have happen. We don't actually support some of those guys, some of those types yet. So it's entirely possible to get a type that we don't recognize. So let's see what that is. Type 2, is that something we should be getting? Handmade debug. Oops, sorry, interface. So type 2 is 0, 1, 2. That's an end block. Well, why would we be calling this on an end block, though? That does seem maybe a little bit odd to me. To be completely honest, that seems just a little strange. So whatever type we are in here, why are we seeing an end block type, right? Can I verify that that's the case? End block? Yes. So yeah, that looks buggy to me. I don't know that we should have any of those in our actual hierarchy, right? Like the hierarchy just should not be having anything of that type, I don't think. So what I'm going to do here, just temporarily, is I'm going to take a look and see why. I'm going to see if I can figure out why we're getting that happening. So in here where we do this, I'm going to assert that when I store this event here, I'm going to assert that the var type is not equal to debug type end block, which in theory it should definitely not be. And then when we do the push, when we do the create debug variable, or sorry, collate debug variable, that's not it. Here it is. When we do these, when we create these variables and we pass the type in, I'm also going to assert here that the type is not equal to end block. Oh. Ha. I know what I forgot to do. I know exactly why that's happening. It's because when we did this collapse, I never went through and stopped doing this. So it's actually just a var group, right? We're storing it in a U8. So now we don't want to do this thing where we leave the top part because we're not segregated. These are all the same type. Remember I did this segregation? But we're in a U8 now. So now this stuff can just be part of the regular thing. So that's actually, none of that checking code is actually necessary. This will probably be okay now. So anyway, there we go. That's all good. And again, we're just getting a little bit simpler each time, which is exactly what I want. Okay, so now we got to address our name situation. And at some point, like I said, I kind of wanted to start moving away from those debug records because they actually caused us a fair bit of pain. It was an interesting experiment, and I was happy to do it because it was that when we were talking about those counters, and stuff like that. But it seems like they're just ending up being more trouble than they're worth to me, right? And if I can't come up with a really good reason to keep them, then I just don't think we should, especially in this phase of the architecture where we see what the things are that we need to do, and they're really, I don't know of any reason why we need to do them, right? I just don't see, I'm not feeling any particular overriding reason why those things have to be in there. They just don't seem to serve a purpose, right? So I think I might want to kind of move away from it a little bit, and let's take a look and see, realistically speaking, what I can do along those lines, right? Okay, so first things first, let me get rid of that end block check there. So first things first, let's just see what happens if we just straight up replace it. Let's see what happens inside the debug platform stuff, right? Let's see what happens if I just, oops, not in platform anymore, I moved into interface. Let's see if I just straight up replace that stuff with something simpler than it was, right? So instead of a debug record index, we're just going to straight up have a char star, which is just a name for now. That's just what we'll have. We're just going to have a name. So we store the clock, we store the name, we store the core index TC, and we store the translation unit and type, right? Although translation unit can go away now too, probably, right? I think that can go away. So now we'd literally just have these, and then we'd have an extra, we're having some extra stuff here, I guess, at some level, right? Because this is two uint16s, and then we'd have a U8. You almost want this core index to be a U8, right? Something like that. But yeah, or we could just say we don't have more than 256 threads, but unfortunately we can't really do that because we want to use the Windows thread IDs, and sometimes those are bigger. So yeah, that's not really what you would want. I'm going to leave that as a U32 for now, maybe then. Well, I don't know. I kind of want to keep that small, and I think I want to maybe try to fit these into something smaller, just again so I can keep that traffic down a little bit. But we'll deal with that a little bit later. I'm going to say something here like to do, expand this out and pack it better, question mark, right? Okay, debug record index, not a member. You're correct. So all of these guys are going to now be upset because we've removed the debug record index stuff from them. But we don't really care about that. And in fact, if we want to just make this some kind of super fatty nonsense thing that's just kind of crazy, and we just store all the same data for the moment, we could actually even see what that looks like by just saying, you know what, let's just get absolutely piggy. In fact, you know what, here it comes. Pig hat, it's pig hat time. Let's pig it out. Let's just get piggy. So instead of what we were doing before, where the debug record had this stuff, just, you know, forget about it. Forget about it. We're just going to stuff that right on in there. Everything's in there. The whole thing, everything is in there. Everything. Not some of it, not a little bit of it. The whole thing is there. The whole thing is there. Every last bit. It's all there. That's the point. So anyway, we do this. And now what I'm going to do is every time we do one of these things where we have the debug record, right, that sort of concept of this debug record thing, we're just going to say that's just not a thing anymore. We don't care about that, right? Debug records are gone. They don't exist. We never heard of them. We don't want them here. We don't like anything like that. So we're just going to get rid of those. Then they're gone, okay? So I'm going to keep pushing through that. Oops, that's not supposed to be a preprocessor command. So I'm going to keep pushing through that, and I'm just going to remove all notion of debug record from anything that we do in here, right? So here's us getting the debug record out of this. I don't want that anymore, so I'm going to get rid of all of that. I'm going to just say we don't have a debug record anymore, and now this stuff is just stored directly on the event, right? To heck with that sort of thing that we were doing before. It just doesn't matter. So when we're doing begin block here, and we do record debug event, up in here, that's going to actually be the thing that we want to record all of the this stuff. So in fact, you know what? That can actually just kind of, I think, go right up in here, right? I believe, anyway. Something like that. And so this needs to take, this record debug event needs to take what the file, the line, and the block name actually are. So every time you record a debug event, you would just pass those things in. You would do something like, you know, file name, line number, and block name. So just be like file, line, block, something like that. And these guys would just be, you know, file, line, and block, right? And so in here, when we do record debug event, we would do File, line. Actually, now that I think about it, and since those are all macros, I could just even leave them that way, I guess, for the most part. So really the only thing I have to pass in is the name, because that doesn't actually change. But I think these would be fine, actually. I think this is actually fine. There's really no reason I can't just leave it that way, right? So yeah, so record debug event now just needs to take that block name, right? But that's really about it. So whatever the block name is, block name init, there it is. This stuff goes away, so goodbye. So begin block is just a record debug event for the begin block debug event, right? Really, really straightforward now. Let's see, anything else that happens here? Begin block has to have a counter. The counter name, I don't know if we want to touch that just yet, but we might even be able to get rid of some of that stuff too eventually. So let's see here. Let's start compiling. Where are we at? End block, not enough for record debug event. That is true. That's true. We did not, in end block, pass enough stuff. So end block calls record debug event. We need a name for that block, and I don't know what it should be. Probably just end block for now, but we could pass something more intelligent there later if we wanted to, I guess. All right, so debug record index doesn't need to get stored anymore. Record index isn't even a thing, right? And so in some sense, this part can just go away as well, right? So record index can be deleted. Record debug event doesn't need to pass a counter. The counter is now no longer relevant, right? So record debug event, right? It just doesn't need to be in there for any particular purpose, at least not that I can tell, right? So yeah, unless we just wanted to put a counter in there, which we might want to do later, but not for all debug events. So I'm going to leave the part that actually gets those out just in case it becomes an issue, right? But otherwise, we're not going to deal with that. Okay. So here, again, don't need to pass it. Begin block, counter, that stuff, I think. Well, we'll just leave it and get rid of it here. All right, so translation unit is going to go away as well. Goodbye, translation unit. Let's see here. Cannot convert from debug type to char where is my debug type? Debug type? Where is that? Debug begin data block. Debug begin data block. Yeah, so here again we have these counters. We definitely don't care about counters for any of this stuff. So really this sort of thing where we're doing record debug event, this stuff can be simplified pretty dramatically. And the block name, again, can just be, I guess, passed in here. Shouldn't that be a stringized version of the value? Isn't that supposed to be what that is? Why weren't we doing that before? I don't understand what was happening there. That just seems dumb. That seems kind of stupid, right? I mean, I don't know. That seems kind of dumb. Anyway, well, if it's dumb, it's dumb. Sometimes you're dumb, and you just got to live with that. That's just, that's your little situation you got to deal with. All right, so let's see. We got closed data block there. Record debug event. That's going to pass. There ain't no value to pass, so this is just a, end block and data block kind of thing. And then this guy here, this is just, again, that could pass the name, and we can get rid of this, right? We also certainly don't care about that anymore. That doesn't even exist. So let's see. Get name now doesn't have to exist either. Get name is just the name that the event has, right? So that's easy. The translation unit stuff are for matching these things. All we really have to do is match the thread ID now. This could, again, we could sort of do a to-do here. Have counters for blocks. So we could put the counters just in the blocks for the extra layer of security to make sure they match. And I might do that. That seems like a pretty good idea. We'll see. So source now goes away, and anything that was coming from source can actually just be retrieved. Well, I guess we got draw rectangle check in there. We can get rid of that. Anything that we have from source can just be changed now to just the event. So I guess allocate open debug block doesn't need to take a source anymore, right? That can go away. And anywhere that's talking about these sources, right? That's something that doesn't actually ever need to be stored pretty much at all, right? Yeah, get record from, not even a thing anymore for the most part. So let's see, I don't know what that was actually being used for, if anything. So it's just looking to see whether the matching block's parent record matches the one that's closing. So again, that's just a way of making sure that these things line up, I guess. So I guess I don't know why we're checking that particular one. I guess just so we can have an idea of what the uniqueness is of this. So we probably could just use the name, right? So we could just say that these two names would have to be the same, right? If we wanted to do that. At least that seems like the most logical thing on the scope to record front, right? Because the name is now a unique string that we can use to identify. It's not that the string is unique, it's the pointer is unique, right? So we can just actually use that to determine like what the scope to record is. So I'm pretty sure we could just do the scope to record is actually just a char star, right? And so in here we would say is the matching block parent. We could say, I guess, we don't know if it's actually true. So I guess we'd say if the matching block parent, I need to get the name from it. I mean, I just need some way of saying that, you know, the name equals 0, or I should say the match name equals 0, and if the match name, if the matching block parent, you know, is valid, then it's going to be the matching block parent name, right, or whatever. But otherwise, or event name, whatever that's going to be. Otherwise, it's going to be 0, right? And that's the name that I want to check against here, right? So that stuff, the debug open block stuff, right, where we're talking about the thing to match. So this is an open debug block, and we're talking about the parent there. That open debug block parent, in here we used to be looking at this. We'd be looking at like the opening event, and we'd be talking about that its name, right? So yeah, something like that. Okay, so we don't care about any of this. That goes away. We don't need, and that would be block name. We don't need to record these guys anymore. That's not relevant. Like, we don't need that record source. We do probably want a typical event, though. So this region probably does want an event to go with it, would be my guess, right? That seems like a thing we would want to do. So in these like debug regions, wherever they ended up, let's see, region, yeah. So when we're pointing to the debug record here, this is something where we would want to maybe capture out some information. Now, when we talk about the region, when we talk about copying these things out, I don't know if we want to copy the whole thing out or not. Like, we could just point to a debug event. It depends if we want to store them as we're kind of doing the round robin thing. So I could put a to do here that says, like, do we want to copy these out in their, you know, entirety or not? And I don't know. But I'm just going to store the event here like so. Although it probably should be the opening event. That'd be my guess. Yeah. So let's see. Just getting rid of some more of these things here. So the region, this is actually going to be debug event, and this would just be region event, right? And all that stuff will still work. Debug record index, yeah, that's not something we know anymore. So I don't really know what we want to do there. Obviously, we could do something where we're just like, okay, the color index is, whatever the pointer is or something like this. There's really no particularly great way to take a look at that, but I guess we could say, yeah, the opening event block name just converted to a unit 16 is going to be the color for now, because we just wanted a stable value for color, basically, something we could use to look stuff up. So sources are gone, so I'm just going to get rid of them. They're not relevant. All the stuff that was coming from them is now coming from the event type, right? And so let's take a look here. Debug state scope to record. Scope to record is just going to be what is the hot record? What is the hot record? It's a debug record. So I don't really want a hot record anymore. What I really want is a hot event, right? And so wherever a hot record is happening, which apparently it never gets set in here, but that's okay. Then whatever the hot event is, we would set it to the hot event block name there. That would work for our purposes. And hot event, but it doesn't look like that ever actually gets set at the moment, for all I can tell. So record counts, again, don't care about these at all. So now I believe this stuff doesn't have to happen anymore, which is pretty great because it was a bunch of janky code that I don't want to deal with. All right, so now in theory, again, we're kind of getting a lot closer to what we want to do here. I feel like, to some degree, though, I do feel like we have a few things that are still not totally ideal in how this is working. First of all, we made a bunch of concessions to that stuff that I feel like we can maybe get rid of now, right? So let's continue the cleanup, because, man, I like cleaning up code. Let's get rid of translation unit index, because I'm pretty sure we don't need translation unit index anymore, right? It's gone. So translation unit index. And that's all good, right? So we don't need that anymore. And now we also could potentially get rid of some of this other stuff here in interface. Let's see. So we just don't need debug records. They're gone. So anything that was referring to those before can go away. I don't know how we got get controller. This I cut and pasted a little bit too far there. Handmade debug table get controller. There we go. So get controller, I think, should not be there. That was a bad place to put that. That should be where game input is. That should be like here, right? Okay. So anyway, so continuing to move forward here, I'm trying to see what else I might want to do with what we're doing. I don't know why we have the concept of a thread ID core index. Is that just because we wanted the platform code to be able to fill that out as a unit? It doesn't look like it, right? So why do we have a thread ID core index? Like, why is that a thing? Does anyone know why that's a thing? Like, is there a reason that we don't just do that? Does anyone know? I'm gonna do the only way I ever know how to figure that out, and that's to just do it, right? Like, why do we have that? I have no idea. Sure doesn't look like a very good reason to me, right? So that all looks pretty good. Again, still all is working nicely there, and I am pretty happy with that. I think that's good. So we're getting there, again, continuing down sort of that road. So we got translation units. I'm just going to go ahead and grep for translation, because I feel like anywhere that we were doing something with a translation unit now, we should stop doing them, right? And hey, there's a to-do. And just go standard one-time hash table because the complexity seems to be causing problems. That is true. It is, right? And so I think this is starting to look a lot better to me, I would say. I'm going to take a look at Handmade optimized. Handmade optimized. I wanted to make sure that nothing in here was doing anything. Yeah, so this nonsense can go away. That's just, not necessary anymore. In here, I believe we got some more nonsense that's happening there. Let's see. I'm just going to look and see if I can find anything that was nonsensical there. So there we go. Debug records main count. So this is also nonsense, right? Not necessary at all. So I think that's good. I think that's all fine. Yeah. Okay. So again, we got that out of there, and that feels really good because that was just kind of annoying code and just not really that necessary. As you saw, we were able to pull it out for really not really very much cost. So if you take a look at what's going on in here, I feel like we could probably, like I said, pack or simplify this a little bit more. Unfortunately, at the moment, I'm not even sure it's really super worth doing it that way. But it's clear that we don't really need, if you look at this, we've got a 32, we've got 64, 64, 64, 32, 32, and then an 8, 1 byte, right? Which is not, not really what we want, to say the least. But that's just how that goes. Now, when we have the file name block name thing here, really the file name block name is kind of a probably a semi-redundant thing. Like, we could use just one pointer to store these two pretty trivially, right? By just like concatenating them together or something like that. So if we wanted to reduce the size of this debug event, we could also do something like make this file, like have file name, then a null terminator, then block name, then a null terminator. And I don't know if that would be reasonable or not, but I'm going to just put a to-do there. Note, to save space, we could put these two strings back to back with a null terminator in the middle, right? All right. Okay, so now we can go back in here where we were doing collate debug records or collate group whatever, blah, blah, blah. Previously, I got rid of this name situation here, but now if I want to, I can totally add it back in, right, if I want to do that. And now we won't have nulls in that location anymore. Like you can see now we've got hot entity again, which is kind of what I had wanted it to say, right? So that's one way of doing that. But the other thing too there is that we probably could have made it so that you don't have to have a custom name for that. The event for that open block probably could have been the actual open block itself, and that seems a little bit more enticing to me. We've got this begin data block thing here. There's the word hot entity. Why am I copying the string again, right? If you take a look at when I do that group create, right? So in this begin block thing, right? Not that one. In this begin block thing where I'm opening this debug block, right? Here's all the stuff I'm doing. Why am I creating another var when there's already a var there, right? This is just a holdover kind of from the fact that we needed a variable when we didn't have one, but now if variables and events are the same thing, we can just get rid of that entire concept, right? That can just go away. Because this var here that was being passed, we can just pass the actual one we're actually on, right? So we can just do that, and now we don't have to allocate one of those strings ever. That doesn't ever actually occur, right? That's not a thing we're ever going to see, like ever. So that is kind of nice as well. So when we do that, we're in good shape. The other thing that's kind of interesting here is if I take a look at this, we do a collate create grouped variable now, and we copy the event onto it. Well, that's just totally stupid. Why are we allocating another one of these when we already have the one that has all the stuff in it that we actually wanted, right? So instead of collate create grouped variable, really all we need to do is do this. That's it, right? I mean, that's all we actually needed to do, was to take whatever the debug event was that came in. We just need to add that to whatever the block group is, right? And the block in this case is thread first open data block. So it's really just that. That's the entirety of what we were actually doing. The whole thing, right? That's it. Make sense? So now, you know, in theory, of course, that didn't go as planned. That was not what I wanted to have happen. Oh, and that's, of course, because now we have this actual group that we're adding here is not labeled a var group, right? It's labeled an open data block, right? But that's just because of the holdover of the concept that an open data block and a var group were different things. But they're not different things anymore, not for us, right? They're now the same thing, right? This var group is actually just an open data block. That's all it is. So we could say that we just get rid of that var group concept entirely, and every place we were doing that, we could just call it an open data block. We'd probably be fine, right? Oops. Gotta actually rerun the program. Not quite. End block. And why is an end block being added? Did I do what I did just moments ago? Did I do it again? Let me see if I did it again. Where are you? Okay, so what did I do here? So we do open data block. Why is closed data block getting pushed on there? That doesn't make much sense to me. Since closed data block is here, that never gets pushed. So why would that be an open data block? Why would that have caused that to occur? I say. I would like to know why. I am going to find out why by using the debugger. Always good to use the debugger. All right, so let's see. Oh, yeah, that's not what it, yeah, my bad. Open data block, debug type, open code block, or type open block is undefined. What is the actual one we're looking at here? I got confused. It was by the fact that I had typed in the wrong thing into the watch window. So the event type is 1, and that in here would mean that it's a begin block. So I'm not sure how a begin block got pushed on there. Because a begin block, well, no, I still don't know how that would get pushed on there. How does that get pushed on there? That's not ever getting added. So there's that begin block, end block. How do you get a debug type of begin block? How does that ever get in here? I don't understand. I don't understand. Why is it happening? Why? 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 Very, very suspicious. Very suspicious to me. Well, first of all, I'm going to get rid of this because we don't actually need that anymore. And let's see. Collate create variable group and add variable group. These are happening. I'm going to do a little assertion here. I'm going to say I want to assert that the link event type is not equal to debug type open block or begin block. So it's not getting added there. Who is actually calling me? Debug draw menu. Yeah. You're just going to call me with that, are you? You're just going to go ahead and call me? Where are we in the hierarchy here? What's our stack look like? And what's our, actually I should say what's the stack depth as well. Stack depth is 1. let's see here. Event, that's actually the Sentinel. Probably, well, no. Let's see here. Iterator. Link. So our event, get render entity basis P. That's this open block for get render entity basis P. That definitely should never have been added. Right? I mean, that should never be added to that should never have been added to a data group. So that's really strange to me. How did it get in there? I don't understand. Add variable to group should be the only way that that actually happens, right? And when that is called, I'm asserting that it's never a begin data block type. So that's pretty strange. I guess it could be the case that, well, no, because when those events are wiped out, I guess it could be the case that as those events are getting written, am I not properly, every time we spin around, am I not properly synchronizing the flushing of these two things? That could actually be. That actually seems like something that's probably true, right? I could see that being the case. Meaning, if I'm currently, this sort of one thing that we have not addressed yet in our hackiness is this sort of situation where we're doing the like frame count, greater than equal whatever, and then we like do the restart collation thing. That part, if I was to do restart collation on every frame, I'd be interested to see if that actually changed things, right? Meaning if I did something where we just did this, for example, and we collate every time, does that prevent the problem? Yeah. So that was just an overwriting problem, was what was happening there. So yeah, so that's problematic. And of course we will, we'll get to fixing that part in maybe even tomorrow. So we're getting down to it. Starting to get in good shape here. All right, so now at least I know what the bug is. Let's do this. To do, need to unify the display cache or the collation paging out with the events paging out now that they are the same thing. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the Q&A in case anyone has any questions about what we were doing here. Not much in the way of questions today, it looks like. HWD2R0. Will you get back to game-related code next week? I have no idea. Probably not, no. I would not expect so. Do you ever wear the piggy hat at work? No, it kind of just sits here on the desk for Handmade Hero. Elvin, what would be the thing that would impress you on a programmer's resume? I don't know. I don't read resumes much. I think I like I like watching people stream their programming. I can usually tell based on watching that if they're good or not, you know? So I probably would want to see a Twitch stream, and I'd want to see how you program on a Twitch stream. I'd like to see, like, you know, 500 hours of Twitch streamed programming that I can just go browse through and see what I think of your coding. You know? Bit off topic, but when will you do the ODE stuff? You mean the ordinary differential equation? You mean just for drag? I think there was only one place that we had ODE, a need for an ODE so far, which is just, which is basically for drag, right? It's usually just you know, you you need to phrase things in terms of e to the x for drag, right? So typically, I mean, well, or for any ODE stuff. So all the ODE stuff is just if you have something that's like, you know, you've got f of t or something equals e to the t. You know, this is like Euler's constant, like the actual e. I'm not making up the letter e. I mean the actual e in math e. Right? Then the derivative of t, and my math is so rusty these days, but, you know, is related to its own self, right? Meaning the function, the e to a power, right? When you take the derivative of it, still retains the same form as it had originally, right? And so when you have something like drag, where you need a function, you have a function which has its own derivative in the function. You need to, you know, you need to be able to use this sort of this fact about e to help you solve those equations. So that's all the ODE stuff that we will do, is the fact that we have a thing where we've got, okay, f prime of t equals some constant times f double prime of, f double prime of t equals some constant times f prime of t, right? We've got the acceleration, which is this term, right? The second derivative equals some constant, which is basically the drag constant, right? In fact, let me just draw this out a little bit better for you. So this is like the acceleration of the object, the drag coefficient, and the velocity, right? And so if you want to compute this stably, where you're going to compute what f prime and if you want to be able to compute f of t and f prime of t, right? If you want to compute these two from this equation, you have different ways of doing it. One is you can numerically integrate it, where you just like assume some actual values for these things and then just do it numerically, which is not accurate, right? It's not going to be exact. It's just an approximation to it. Or what you can do is actually integrate this up by assuming that that means that drag is a function of e, because it appears at its own derivative, so you know that it actually is. And drag is such a simple equation, you know, that ends up being possible. I hope that makes some sense. So that's all that's really the, you know, if you're looking for real, you know, hardcore information on ODEs, ordinary differential equations, this is not really going to be, there's not going to be much of it on Handmade Hero. So you're probably going to have to take some initiative on going and learning that yourself. I'm not really an ODE person, so it's like, you know, I'm not really the person to give you a lot of information on that anyway. But yeah. And yeah, sorry, what you said in the stream is correct. I wrote that poorly. It's actually that. It's been a long time. Like I say, my math is really rusty. T is obviously the dependent variable. That's actually what your you know, that's actually the varying variable. It's the variable. So it's the constant that's in here that actually moves out, right? So yeah. And you can kind of see, you can see why drag is so easy too if you look at these things, because if I write this again without the scribbles on top of it, right? I'm going to use C for the constant instead, since that's what I was using over here for no apparent reason. Right? You can see that like this form here, if you take e to the some constant times the dependent variable, if you take its derivative, you get this, right? Oops. If you have something that looks like that, and then you look at what this looks like, it's the exact same. It's this equation down here exactly, right? So you would just replace, if this is your coefficient of drag, you could just imagine like, okay, I've got my, this is my actual function. So now I would know what these were, right? Yeah. Like I said, I'm the wrong one to teach it. You know, I don't know, pseudonym 73 ain't here, I don't think today. But like you really want someone who's more into that side of that field than me to teach you ODEs. So I'll literally just do the base, like the most barest thing to get the drag working, and that's about all that's about as far as I can take you, because I just don't have the expertise to do a good job. Let's see. Xdeadbringer X. I see a lot of branching in your code. Aren't you trashing the caches and the branch predictor? Ever thinking about running HMH through cache grind? So, first of all, I mean, at the risk of stating the obvious, you know, branching is what makes a game, right? Like, branching is what creates the actual behavior, right? So, you know, you really don't want to be thinking until your game is running and does all the things you want to do. You definitely don't want to be thinking about whether you're trashing a branch predictor or whether the fact that you have branches is going to cause a cache problem. First thing I would say is, in general, the caches, trashing the caches per se, I don't know that the kinds of branching we're doing have all that many effects on the caches. They may have problems for the cache itself, sort of the short-term fact of like, okay, you know, if the branch is mispredicted, it may load a little extra memory that it didn't have to load or something like this. But that's, you know, that's really not something that you're going to be thinking about 99% of the time, right? That is such a small performance thing by comparison to what you would normally probably be dealing with. There's very limited types of code that we're going to be doing AMA where you actually would ever care about that. So really, in terms of the branch predictor side of things, you know, the branch predictor, A is pretty good, but B, the thing to remember is where we're doing the branching tends to be in places where the only alternative to doing the branching would be for you to bundle these into arrays of similar types, right? And so you could process like all your U32s together or something like that. Like, that's not really an option. There's no option, there's nothing you could do, right? There's nothing you could do in your code that would prevent you from having to go, I've got a menu filled with things, they're heterogeneous, like is what you're seeing in here, right? There's no way you could really do anything that's going to prevent some kind of an indirection. You could do an indirect jump, or you can do a branch, but they're both going to be something that's a dependent variable operation, right? And so what's the alternative? Like, what do you think you're going to change this code to do to get rid of those branches? Right? There isn't something. You're either going to have a switch statement or you're going to have a function call through an indirect, through a vtable. And both of those things are not predictable by the compiler, and certainly not by the processor until it actually sees what the value is it's going to actually use, right? So. I've been soaking up so much of the stream as I catch up. I realize that I'm writing the usage code first nowadays. It's really streamlined by implementation brain. Just wanted to say thanks. Debate was great too. Well, thank you very much. I'm very glad you enjoyed them. And I'm glad that the usage code first stuff is helping. Chrono Dragon, been learning about x86 assembly in one of my CS classes. Is there any way to force the compiler to use a register for a certain variable instead of a place on the stack? Well, yes and no. You can actually use the register keyword, but I don't know if it works in x64 anymore. I don't remember. So I guess I just don't know. I just don't know if this still works in x64. So, I mean, all I can say is that there is a way to tell the compiler you would like something to be kept in a register. I just don't know if it actually obeys that in x64 ever. It might be one of those things it just doesn't use anymore, but you can. Yeah. So I guess you can give it a try, I guess is what I'm saying. Your mileage may vary. Call for Fly, just asking, but is it worthwhile to put so much effort on the debug system at this stage? There's a lot of things we're doing right now that I'm not sure how it will help in the future. Maybe just because I've never programmed games before, but if I, as a newbie game programmer, were to work on this, do you suggest going as far as you're going right now, or proceed on the gaming part to see what I need first before doing it? Well, I guess what I would say about that is, like I said when we started the debug stuff, I wanted to take this opportunity to show how to do this kind of programming. So I'm definitely doing something a little more elaborate than is necessary, right? I mean, if all you care about is the bare minimum thing. So I would say that, you know, yeah, if you're a total novice, should you be spending a lot of time on this? Maybe the answer is no, but the other question is maybe the answer is yes, because this is something you should know how to do right here. And it's a very safe way to play around with this, and you should be able to do this kind of code, right? So I don't know. That's a tough question to answer. I guess I would say it depends what your goals are for whatever you happen to be doing at the time. That's what I would say, right? Mr. First mentioned, well, if you would just replace the branch with polymorphism. Yeah, good point. Because polymorphism's free. The processor just does it for you, right? Elvin, what's more impressive, previous projects and practical experience versus a college degree? Are you asking me personally or in the industry? Because I don't know industry-wide. You'd have to kind of, I don't know, right? So I guess what I would say is, for me personally, I don't care if you went to college. It has absolutely no bearing on anything, in my opinion. So college degree means almost nothing. That doesn't mean that it might not be a good idea to get a college degree because of all the stuff you might learn when doing it. So maybe the college degree is good to get, but the fact that you got it doesn't actually mean anything to me. I want to see the code, right? I want to see what you're actually doing and how you're doing it. James Woodman, compilers generally ignore the register keyword. Yeah, I mean, like I said, that's my assumption. I think it kind of used to work. Like, I remember you could do some things. with it in the old days, but just my assumption these days is that, the compiler would take it as a hint at best, so the sort of what you were suggesting, were like maybe, you want to tell the compiler to do something specific in x86 code and it has to do it, that I don't think you can do. I don't know of a way to tell it to do that. Looks like we're pretty good with questions. Oh, and I didn't answer quite on the final thing about the person who asked the branch predictor thing. They were saying, have you ever considered running HHH through cache grind? And what I want to say about that is like, that now is not a particularly useful time to do that. So analyzing cache usage is something that's a very fine-tuned optimization process, right? So while you do want to kind of have in the back of your mind, if you're doing something very significant that's going to have serious architectural implications for your program that will force bad cache behavior or something, that maybe is something to think about earlier. But in general, thinking about your cache usage while you're just trying to construct the main portion of your program is just usually a complete waste of your time. Because you go through so many iterations of how things are arranged, if you then add thinking about caches to that process, when 99% of that code will not even take enough time to matter at all what it does to the caches, you're falling prey to the standard Canoe thing, which is premature optimization root all evil. You're spending tons of mental energy on something that is irrelevant. So what you want to do in terms of thinking about caches, you want to delay that till the point where you're ready to go, what is my primary data flow through here? Okay, how do I make that? How do I, make that sort of a nice cache coherent thing? And so you really don't want to be thinking about that until you are actually concentrating on performance, which is now where we're doing it. Especially not going to do that in a debug system, right? Like this code doesn't even get run on the end user's machine. So thinking about the branches in it is kind of ridiculous, right? All right, I think I don't see any more cues, so I'm going to wind down. Save our mischief blackboard. I don't know why that's up. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero. It's been a pleasure coding with you as always. If you would like to follow along with the Handmade Hero development at home, you can do so by pre-ordering the game on handmadehero.org, and it comes with the source code so you can play around with it and learn from it and do other stuff, experiment and so on. We also have a Patreon page if you want to support the video series. We have a forum site if you want to ask questions or see an annotated episode guide maintained by the community so you can catch up on past episodes, and a tweet bot that lets you know when special events are happening and the general schedule for the week if you want to catch a stream live. And speaking of catching a stream live, we'll be back here next week, and we'll be back here on Monday for the last week of Handmade Hero before I will probably be off for 2 weeks, since I will be out of the country and unable to stream. So next week will kind of be the last week of work and then before we have a brief break. So that's the situation. Hope to see you back here on Monday. Until then, have fun coding, and I will see you guys on the internet. Take it easy, everyone.